Title of the talk, Partnerships in Practice in True Nature of Partnerships. I'm sharing the stage with Megan today, who's been taking care of the whole afternoon sessions. I introduced myself. I'm kind of new to the realm of Oyster South and oyster aquaculture. I've been dabbling in aquaculture for many years, and I'm not quite there, but I wanted to introduce myself. I'm actually the chief of the Habitat Ecology branch located at the NOAA Southeast Fisheries Science Center in Galveston here, but I have labs all across the southern U.S. We have been culturing, we've done turtles for many years. We stopped doing turtles, and we're using that space to move into finfish and shellfish aquaculture. We're also growing some corals, as well as we're working on some conch as well, on the endangered species side. However, this today is going to be sort of updating, that's really loud, updating on the Gulf Oyster Breeding Center. And this is far more than just myself and Megan, as you can see. We've got folks from USM, as well as NOAA's Office of Aquaculture that have been involved in this along the way. And there are, of course, many more than that. But let's get in our way back machine real quick for a second, and a lot of folks have probably heard this over the years because this is something that has been in development for many years. Essentially, years ago, when the oyster industry was fledgling, far more than it is still today, it was not very stable. We didn't have a lot of information on good brood stock. People did, of course, did not have, kind of preaching to the choir here because you guys are the growers, right? Didn't have good quality information on how to get to the good oyster that you need to be able to grow it. So a bunch of people got together from a lot of places, and there's actually more than just this, got together and said, well, let's put our heads together and figure out how to move forward to bring resources to the Gulf Coast or to the South and get and provide the industry what it needs to get things moving. So this is sort of the design that was brought up. It was creation of this Gulf Oyster Breeding Consortium, but essentially the big part up here is having the scientific committee that interacted with the Business Advisory Committee. So essentially, they really looked on focusing on joining business with the science to get everybody where we need to float the boats. Everybody boats gets floated. And the goal itself was to ultimately, wrong button, to have three parts where we're looking at genetic analysis to, of course, design those traits and, of course, grow them out and then finally, to hatch them out and then finally grow them out. And the goal here is ultimately to aid growers, not to create competition with growers, correct? So we are looking at an iterative process that gives us the ability to take the grow out, look at the results that we see, tie that back into the genetics, and ultimately over many years and many cycles, focus in on the traits that are needed. It could be for generality, it could be for location. It's just all going to depend on what the industry is looking for. Okay, so part one of that has been the SALT project, which really has focused on the genetics, and Megan's going to sort of talk us about that.
Okay, so I'm going to keep this pretty kind of the background of the SALT selective breeding program, what we've done so far, kind of how we put together the breeding program, and what's next. But essentially, the SALT Consortium is kind of the background and what we're stair-stepping off to create this Gulf Oyster Breeding Program. If you are interested in taking a deep dive in the genetics, we have a few of the geneticists here that worked on this project, but I'm going to suggest Heather King. She did her master's thesis when she was with USM, and she's working on her PhD with Auburn, and it was on this project. And she's in the back of the room, kind of hiding out, but she would be willing to chat with you if you want to get a little bit deeper dive into the genetics. Do you have the clicker? If you want to take a deep dive in the genetics. Oops, did I forget to say something on that? Okay, so the selective breeding program, everybody always asks what SALT stands for, and to be honest, I can never, ever remember because it doesn't really make sense for the acronym that's up there, but it's Selective Aquaculture something, something, something trait. But essentially, it's a selective breeding program for the Gulf. Oops. Okay, so the objectives. The main objective was to develop that breeding program that will improve growth traits in the Gulf, and really we started to focus on initially two basic environments, a high salinity and a low or a variable salinity. And then we also, kind of secondary to that, is that we wanted to have develop a germplasm repository. Basically, we wanted to cryopreserve sperm, potentially eggs if we can work that out, so that when we have that good selective genetics that we want to keep, we can kind of have that on standby for when we need it. And then second to that was then to evaluate the response of our selection on those diploids and how that translates into how the triploids do. So Matt kind of mentioned the kind of consortium. It's the same basic framework that we're going to go forward with. Essentially, we had representation from 5 institutions and from each of the 5 Gulf states. And then we also had that Business Advisory Council. So the research teams was University of Southern Mississippi, Auburn University, University of Florida, LSU, Louisiana Sea Grant, and then Texas A&M. And then we had 2 representatives from industry that were a part of that Business Advisory Council. So every year, a couple times, we would check in with them. And initially, when we started this project, we did a survey and asked what traits they were interested in seeing being improved and that were really important to them. So that's how we came to the kind of focusing in on the salinity, the high salinity and low salinity. Because as you all know, our Gulf is very dynamic. You may have 35 parts per 1,000 in one, and you may have 5 in another. So we needed genetics that could really withstand that. So this program, the breeding program that we did, is a common garden, and we would do a walk-back analysis. And basically what that means is that instead of taking a mother and a female, male, female, and spawning them and keeping those families separate the entire culture period. So what we did is we do those crosses, we would make sure that we had fertilization, and then we pooled those into culture tanks at the same rate. So we'd put the same amount in the tanks, but at the end of the larval run, we don't really know who survived during that period or throughout the seed grow-out period, but what that does is it really reduces the workload, so we don't have to keep those separate the whole time. That's really hard to do. So this just allows that feasibility. Then we use genetics to go back and identify who the parents were. So after we had harvested those petty villagers for those communal larval tanks, they were stocked out into the grow-out sites. And we had 7 different sites with variable salinities, some that we were hoping would be high salinity and some at that low. But as you know, you can't really predict what one season is going to be over the next. Okay, so that's kind of how we approached generally. So where we were at, 2019, the consortium was created. What's my time? Okay. In 2020, we created the first F1s, and the F1, the first generation. We took the brood stock, the founder population from 17 different sites across the Gulf, spawned those, made that first generation. Then that's when we deployed those progeny, the babies, out on 7 different sites. At the time of harvest, we identified 2 sites that had high salinity, 2 sites that had low or variable salinity, and then we crossed the highs with the highs, lows with the lows, did some controls, and that was our first generation of selective lines. And that was in 2022, and we did that again in 2024. So that's kind of where we're at now with that 3rd generation. We also wanted to look at disease resistance for those, so not just how they performed in those salinity sites with growth and survival, but also see if they had a disease resistance to dermo, vibrio, mortality events. And that was more in a controlled environment structured in the lab. We also looked at high temperature and low salinity and how they dealt with that stress. And then we started looking at reproductive traits as well. So in general, and to kind of speed up a little bit, both the high and the low saw an improvement. So when we selected, and we wanted to see that there was an improvement in that next generation. So the trait that we were looking at, we wanted to see that, and we actually selected for what we were trying to select for. And that happened both in high and low, but for the third generation, we've talked about the mortality events that we've seen. So when we had those animals on the grow-out sites, we saw really high mortality event in those low salinities, so it kind of appears that we had a kind of backslide, but really there were some confounding factors there. So next, future is that the whole goal of this was to be able to get those animals into the hands of industry, right? We want you to have animals that you're growing on your farm that are performing better. And so the high salinity oysters, the third generations, went to a farmer on the Gulf in Florida. And the goal for that is in 2025, 2026 was to produce triploids. And then we also have the low salinity oysters that we're kind of stepping back, regrouping after that mortality event. So this year and next year we plan to produce and get those in the hands of farmers as well. All right, passing it on to Matt to kind of wrap up. What's next?
All right. So where are we now? 3 minutes. You talked a long time. All right, we'll speed this up. Basically what's happened is through the Restore program from NOAA Post-Deepwater Horizon that was created, University of Southern Mississippi and NOAA's Office of Aquaculture, the team has been able to cobble together enough funds to get this Gulf Breeding Center off the ground and active. That's what it looks like. If everybody's seen the poster outside, I didn't know that was going to be here, so it was great to see. They can go over some of the finer details. But that's what it's supposed to look like, theoretically. That's what it looks like right now. And so we're very happy about this because the site's been cleared, the concrete's been, is in the ground, and things are getting moving. Right now we're looking at around an October start date. There's a little bit further picture of it. Planned layout, I'm not going to go through this, but essentially it creates an entire recirculation, all recirculating systems designed to be able to handle every component from algae production to spawning to settlement to grow out, all in one facility. And as we do that, we can start producing enough seed to start providing to farmers to start taking the next step. And to start figuring out, oh, well, here we go. That's basically what I said. We're going to be able to produce 1.5 billion eyed larvae per year. We have the research lab, dry lab, wet lab, and plenty of algae production. So as trying to figure out what the next steps are going to be in the lab to complement the SALT program, we recently had a research priorities workshop where we did bring researchers, managers, commercial growers all together. Take a picture of that if you'd like to see it, although the link is not active. I just got this published last week, and the link is not quite active yet, but it will be soon. But essentially it sums up what we were looking for. Better disease resistance, shape, taste, size, etc. And where are we at? We're going to be, we're building right now. We're looking to be finished by October, and hopefully we'll have our first production in February of 2027. So, to do that, we need help. We don't want to poach anybody, but if you have anybody that you know that might be interested, we are hiring. That link actually works. So, feel free to pass that along and share it, but we need somebody to help get this program off the ground and moving. So, already started.
To the top.
All right. Thank you.